Okay, today we're going to be doing a CySA plus practice test, and it's going to be like time 30 seconds. It'll show you the answer if, we get past that 30 seconds. But what is the primary purpose of time synchronization and log ingestion? So we have 2 reduced log file sizes, 2 compressed log entries to ensure accurate correlation of events across systems, or to encrypt log data. I think it would be this one because the main thing for time synchronization. Okay, yeah. 30 seconds was, so the one that brighter color green is going to be the right one. To ensure accurate correlation of events across systems. So this is a really, really easy question. It wouldn't be to encrypt log data. It wouldn't be to compress log entries. It wouldn't be to reduce log file sizes. Because keeping the time is so you can keep the time accurately, right? So next question. Which Windows component stores system and application configuration settings? Task Manager, Control Panel, Event Viewer, or Windows Registry? For me, I would think it would be Windows Registry because that's where all of your settings and all your registry keys are. So I would think that the Windows Registry is where you would do that. Yep, and Windows Registry was correct because we ran out of time. What does serverless architecture mean in security operations? The cloud provider manages server infrastructure. Applications run on local machines only. Servers run without operating systems, or no servers are used at all. So serverless, it might be it's not using any stuff, but you have to have somewhere to run that in. So I'd say the cloud provider manages server infrastructure. Because think about it, it says serverless, which means it's not actually running on a server, but that's just what the cloud providers call it, serverless. Like AWS uses Lambda, you're not going to need to know that, but Lambda is something that they use for serverless, where you can run code server without a server, right? So next question. And before I go to the next question, let's go over these other ones. Applications run on local machines only. That is called, I believe it's called servers run without operating systems. That's not really possible. Applications that run only on local machines are basically, what are they called? So a lot of the times they call it open source stuff, right? Stuff that you can run locally, right? So that would be something they could run locally. It would be called open source stuff they can run locally. So yeah, just think cloud provider manages server infrastructure while you're just running code on their server, and it's allowing you to just receive what the output of the code or what the application actually does that you're having that program run. So it still runs on the cloud provider servers. It's not completely serverless, but that's what they call it. Okay, what is the main security benefit of network segmentation? This one should be really easy if you've ever studied for the Security Plus or have taken the Security Plus. And the main benefit of segmentation is it's about to show you the answer, but limiting lateral movements of threats because if they're not connected together on a network, how are they going to be able to talk to each other, stuff like that. So that's the main thing, to stop the lateral movement of threats, because privilege escalation, they're trying to get up to the most highest privilege system, right? Or just something that they can get root access to be able to stay persistent on the system, right? I hope you understood that, but let's get to the next question. Which authentication method uses multiple verification factors? Federation, MFA, SSO, CASB, and I'll read those out for you. Multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, or cloud access security broker. And since it's already about to end, I'm going to say it's multi-factor authentication, because multi-factor authentication, right? I didn't get any points for that because I didn't click on it myself. I waited till the timer ran out. But which authentication method uses multiple verification factors? That would be multi-factor authentication. That uses multiple, because multi-factor authentication uses different stuff, something something you have, different factors like that would help verify that it was actually you. So let's go to the next question. And they expect you to know stuff from the Security Plus for the CySA Plus, so you have to know the background of that stuff. But a lot of the times courses will actually teach you that. But let's get to the next question. What is beaconing and network traffic analysis? Is it ARP requests? Is it broadcast DNS queries, or is it regular communication patterns to a C2 server, or is it DHCP address assignment? So the timer is about to end. I'm going to say it's regular patterns to a C2 server. And why was it regular communication to a C2 server? So a command and control server has to beacon to be able to get that traffic sent back. And that's why in the if you're seeing output traffic that's like very sending a lot of data out, you know that's a command and control server. The reason it wasn't ARP request is because an ARP request doesn't necessarily say what beaconing actually is. Broadcasting DNS queries also doesn't say it. DHCP address assignment. Assigning a IP address with DHCP does not signal what beaconing is. So that is why regular communication patterns to a C2 server is correct. What does unusual processor consumption on a host typically indicate? Low disk space, normal system operations, software updates running, potential crypto mining, or malicious processes. So processor consumption, for me, it would be potential crypto mining or malicious processes. Let me just say why I think that is because if you see a spike in CPU, most of the time crypto's being mined with your CPU, right? So, or a lot of the times it's malicious stuff that's using a lot of your CPU up. But most of the time, if your CPU just goes to 100%, it'll be a crypto miner. But a lot of the times they try and make it so, you can't really see that it's actually using it, so they'll not use 100%. They'll use more like 20 or 30% of your CPU, and you'll have no idea, right? Because they'll have a bunch of different botnets of these crypto miners, right? But without further ado, let's get to the next question. Which tool is commonly used for packet capture analysis? Metasploit, Nessus, Wireshark, or Nmap? So I just want to talk through these. Metasploit, I believe it's used for vulnerabilities and stuff, and the fact that you're exploiting it and you're actually, but I've seen people do stuff with it. So the answer was Wireshark for this one, but Metasploit, you can do some pretty cool stuff with it, because when I've looked at it, it's like a tool where you can do all sorts of different attacks. There's not just one exploit that you can do. There's multiple different exploits that you can pull off with Metasploit. What is Nessus? Nessus is a vulnerability scanner that scans for certain vulnerabilities. I believe it's more operating system based vulnerabilities. And then we have Wireshark, which is of course gonna be our packet capture analysis. What other stuff can packet capture analysis? That would be TCP dump, another one that can do packet capture analysis. Nmap, what's it for? Nmap is basically so you can see open ports on your network, so you can scan your network to see if there's any attack vectors. Attack vectors are basically how the attacker gets in, what they can actually exploit. So they might be exploiting, they see that there's an open port, so they can exploit a certain vulnerability that port aligns with, right? It might be an SSH vulnerability. It might be in a Samba share vulnerability. But let's get to the next question. What does SIEM stand for? So, System Information and Event Management, Security Information and Event Management, Secure Internet Event Monitoring, Secure Incident Event Monitor. So, I can already tell what one it is. I'm not going to give it away right this second until the timer gets down. But I can tell that it's this one. Security Information and Event Management. So it's basically where you can see, it's like a centralized dashboard, which I've seen them you see WAZUH, WAZUH. You see that a lot of the time for threat, to see different compliance standards and different vulnerabilities and stuff like that, and the MITRE framework, stuff like that. A lot of the times they'll have that stuff, and I've messed around with it a little bit, but I don't know if there's going to be a video on it. So why these other ones are wrong, it's because none of these other ones are actually what SIEM stands for. That's the reason the other ones are wrong. So let's go to the next question. What is the purpose of EDR solutions? blocking spam emails, managing user passwords, detecting and responding to threats on endpoints, encrypting data at rest. So I already know what the right answer is. Endpoint detection and response. So I think I just gave away the answer, but that's going to be detecting and responding to threats on an endpoint. The reason is because blocking spam emails, managing user passwords, encrypting data at rest, that's not what EDR is used to do. It's mainly used to detect and respond to threats on endpoints. That could be malware, that could be viruses, that could be really any type of like vulnerability. To be able to quarantine and fix that system, you'd use EDR as a solution if you had that solution implemented. So that's why these other ones are wrong. Let's go to the next question. What does WHOIS provide in threat analysis? Does it provide real-time network traffic? Does it provide firewall rules? Malware signatures? Domain registration information? What does it provide? I think it provides the domain registration information. So I'm just going to click on that. So that was the right answer. So WHOIS lookups mainly to look for like domain registry information to see who owns an actual domain, information about that domain, stuff like that. And you can look up any domain, right? So that's one of the things that you can do. So, you know, I might actually do a WHOIS lookup. So this right here is WHOIS lookup. So I can type in like facebook.com, just an example. And as you can see, you have facebook.com. When was it registered? 1997, 0329. It expires on 2034, 0330. It was updated last on 2025, 0423. And here's the name servers. And we have our registrar information. It was registered by an LLC. You have the email to send all those like complaints and stuff like that. So that's how Facebook was registered. So that gives information when it was actually registered, stuff like that. So I just showed you like, I was just showing you to show you what it would actually look like if you looked at a WHOIS lookup. So let's go to the next question. Purpose of sandboxing and malware analysis. To back up system files, to execute suspicious files in an isolated environment, to encrypt sensitive data, or to permanently delete files. Well, this one's very, very obvious. It's actually to execute files in an isolated environment, because you're not going to want to run malware on your actual system, because malware could stay persistent. If it's an actual good malware, it can actually stay persistent. Even if you went and installed a new operating system, it could still probably stay persistent. If it was a RAM or a memory-based malware that kept on coming back, right? But you just have to think about that. So let's go to the next question. What does DMARC, domain, messaging, authentication, reporting, and conformance help prevent in email security? Attachment scanning, data encryption, email spoofing and phishing, or spam filtering? So I think it's email spoofing and phishing. So it's not attachment scanning. DMARC doesn't scan for attachments. It's not data encryption, even though DMARC uses technologies that can use public key infrastructure. It doesn't do nothing with data encryption, right? Except with those other technologies under the hood that can do it. Like, I believe DKIM, Domain Keys Identified Mail, and Center Policy Framework might use PKI. We also have spam filtering. Why it wasn't right. Spam filtering isn't the main objective that DMARC's trying to provide. The main thing it's trying to provide is this email legit, because a lot of people, they can like fake emails and it looks like it's coming from the real deal. It says the same name as the other person and everything. But if DMARC isn't saying it's the same person, it's not the same person, right? So that's why email spoofing and phishing is right. Okay, next question. What is the file hashing used for in security analysis? Verifying file integrity and identifying known malware. Compressing files. Deleting duplicated files. Encrypting files. So this one's painfully obvious, right? Verifying file integrity and identifying known malware. So what hashing does is it gives you like that hash value, and it's like different hashing algorithms give you different or more secure, right? Some hashing algorithms are more secure. Verifying file integrity and identifying known malware, because see, hashing, the main focus of it isn't to identify malware. The main focus is to identify, oh, was this corrupted, stuff like that. But you know, oh, if it did change, that could indicate malware, but It's more likely indicating, oh, it got corrupted, because you don't just jump the gun and say, oh, it's malware, right? So, compressing files, that's not going to be. You don't compress files with hashing. Deleting duplicated files. Hashing has nothing to do with deleting files. Encrypting files. Hashing has nothing to do with encrypting files. So that's why those ones are wrong. What is impossible travel and user behavior analysis? Users accessing blocked websites, after hours access, failed password attempts, or login attempts from geographically impossible locations in a short time. So, for this one, it's going to be login attempts from geographically impossible locations in a short time. Reason they say travel is because of geographical. Because it might be from, like, Russia, and you're in the United States. So that's going to be like, how is he all the way in Russia whenever he's supposed to be in the United States? So that's why the reason that's the other ones are wrong. Because this one's saying how he's in a different location. Users accessing blocked websites, that has nothing to do. After hours access. I don't see how that would have anything to do with it. Failed password attempts. This doesn't say anything about passwords, this question. So that's why this one is right. What type of threat actor is an advanced persistent threat? So automated bot, I have no idea why it would be that. Script kiddie. Sophisticated persistent well-resourced attacker. Or we have an amateur attacker. Or hacker, my bad. So what type is it? For me, it would be sophisticated, persistent, well-resourced attacker. Because, if you think about it, advanced persistent threat. So you see persistent in there. They're sophisticated. They have a lot of resources. They have money, right? I mean, they have not just money. Money doesn't, like, do everything. I mean, they have really more, like, zero-day vulnerability, stuff like that. And a lot of the times, APTs will be using zero-day vulnerabilities. Or more advanced hacking techniques. They're not going to be using those script kiddie, automated bot, amateur hacker type stuff. And, I mean, sophisticated. They're really sophisticated. Meaning they use highly technical. They use custom-made. A lot of the times they use custom-made attacks, right? Exploits. Zero-day vulnerabilities. Okay, next question. What does TTP stand for in threat intelligence? Tactics, techniques, and procedures. Technical testing protocol. Threat tracking platform. Total threat protection. So, I already know what one's right, so that's going to be tactics, techniques, and procedures. If you've looked really at anything MITRE ATT&CK framework, MITRE ATT&CK framework relates to TTP, right? Tactics, techniques, and procedures. Because MITRE ATT&CK will actually show you all of these tactics, techniques, and procedures. So you see this attack MITRE. So, as you can see, we have these techniques, hide sub-techniques, right? And we can click on this. We can see this is like their main. And as you can see, we have reconnaissance. We have resource development. We have initial access. We have execution. We have persistence. We have privilege escalation. So, if I look down here, you can see resource development. But first, we got to do the reconnaissance, actually scanning. But a lot of times, active scanning, you can actually detect someone that's actively scanning you, right? Gather victim host information. hardware, software, firmware, client configurations. And this is just how you get the information about your victim, the person you're trying to attack. For the resource development, this is trying to get what type of resources they use, stuff like that. So you stage it, you have SEO poisoning, link target, drive-by target. You install digital certificate, upload the tool, and upload. So that's all the stuff, right? And you basically, your main goal in resource development is to acquire access. After you've already done all your research, all your reconnaissance, then you get to the initial access part, which is like, you see content injection. That's injecting, right? And you can see with content injection, that's like SQL injection, stuff like that, I believe. If I'm not wrong on that. But as you can see, what they say this is basically the adversary would, you know, right here they say that they would drive by the target followed by drive-by compromise. So they're injecting a malicious payload into the website. And a lot of times I see them do it with XML, like cross-site scripting, XSS. My bad, it's cross-site scripting XSS. But for this example, they're saying Disco has achieved initial access. So they're using Disco to achieve that initial access. They're using Mustached Bouncer to inject content into the DNS. So this has nothing to do with cross-site scripting, SQL text. This is more injecting stuff in an already made website. Into the DNS, into the HTTP, into the SMB share. Server message block, my bad. Replies to redirect specifically targeted victim to a fake Windows update page to download the malware. We have mitigations which would help that, but a lot of the times you can prevent this with the mitigations. Where possible, ensure that online traffic is appropriately encrypted through services such as trusted VPNs. Consider blocking download, transfer, and execution of potentially uncommon file types known to be used in adversary campaigns. So restricting those websites, blocking websites, is another way to block that. So I hope that helped you understand the MITRE ATT&CK framework and how tactics, techniques, and procedures relate to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Next question. Which is an open source threat intelligence source? Classified military reports, government bulletins and cert advisories, private corporate databases, proprietary vendor feeds. Proprietary means you have to pay for it. So that's obviously not right. Open source stuff is usually free. Private corporate databases, that also isn't free because it's private. So the right answer would be government bulletins and cert advisories. What is the primary purpose of a honeypot? To filter spam emails, to encrypt network traffic, to store backup data, or to attract and analyze attacker behavior. So the right answer for this would probably be, I'll give you a second, but the right answer for this would be to attract and analyze attacker behavior. Because the honeypot's trying to get you in, trying to figure out how you're actually getting in, right? So that they can see what commands you're actually running, stuff like that, when you're actually inside the network. So a lot of times they'll actually see it with like keyloggers that they've already had on the server, so they can see what type of command you're running, stuff like that. That logs every command you type, stuff like that. What are indicators of compromise? User satisfaction scores, evidence that a system has been breached, network performance statistics, or business impact metrics. So I already know what one this is. It's gonna be evidence that a system has been breached, because a lot of the times you're trying to figure out how the actual thing was exploited, right? Because a lot of times you don't know, so you're trying to find that indicator of compromise. And once you found that it was actually been breached and it's just not a false positive, right? Then you're actually going to know, oh, that was a evidence that it's been breached, right? So next question. What does security security orchestration, automation, and response. Automate and security operations. Network cabling. Threat response and orchestration workflows. User provisioning only. Software development. I better click it. So threat response and orchestration workflows, that one is correct, because a lot of the times you see threat response and orchestration, right? They're trying to respond to threats with SOAR, right? And orchestration, the order of operations, right? How you actually orchestrate. You think like an orchestra. I don't know, this is just a like metaphor for what I'm saying, but you think like an orchestra where you see a lot of people like playing different instruments. You got that guy up there waving his thing, his finger or whatever, and they're playing their instruments, right? So that's what orchestration means in that sense. But in this sense, they're talking about how everything works together, right? Order of operations, basically. What is data enrichment and threat intelligence? Compressing log files, encrypting threat data, adding context and additional information to threating indicators, or deleting old threat data. So, I mean, these ones up here, I don't know. But this one down here, maybe. But it's actually that one. What is data enrichment and threat intelligence? Data enrichment. For this, I mean, the reason it's adding context and additional information, enrichment means you're adding more stuff to it. You're enriching something, right? You're adding something to it. You're adding something that gives it more, like, value. That's what enrichment is. It's giving something more value, basically. So, adding additional information makes that information a lot more valuable if it is actually good information. So, they're adding more information to these threat indicators instead of just having this suboptimal information that's not going to help you later. And the main thing is like documentation and threat intelligence, because if you don't document how these threats work and add all that like enrichment, adding that value basically, your documentation isn't going to be very good. What is Zero Trust architecture based on? Perimeter-based security only? Trusting known IP addresses? Never trust, always verify every access request? Or trusting all internal network traffic? So, the right one for this is never trust, always verify. Because these other ones are trusting all internal, trusting known. And while trusting known IP addresses does work some of the times, it doesn't work all the time, right? That's why we have never trust, always verify. Because if you trust a known IP address, they could spoof your IP address, right? And then boom, they're allowed to go in. But if you do never trust, always verify every access request, then you'll be more prone to not receiving that attack, right? If you know what I mean. So let's go to the next question. What does DLP technology prevent? What does DLP stand for? It's data loss prevention. So we have phishing emails, unauthorized data exfiltration, malware infections, or denial of service attacks. You know, I already know what the answer is, but it's going to be unauthorized data exfiltration, because data loss, I mean, they're trying to exfiltrate that data. You're going to lose that data. Someone's going to go, you know, get all that secret, all those secret files they don't want anyone seeing, right? Those federal, like, regulated, you know, government confidential files that you don't want people seeing, like blueprints on how to make a, you know, certain type of thing that we don't want getting out, right? So that's the reason why it was unauthorized. If you think about data loss prevention, you're trying to prevent that data from getting out and be exfiltrated by attackers. What is the purpose of SSL inspection? So SSL inspection to block HTTPS connections, to issue SSL certificates, to decrypt and analyze encrypted traffic for threats. So the correct answer for this one is that. So they're talking about inspection. That's the reason this one's right. So to be able to inspect SSL, since SSL is encrypted, right? You're going to have to decrypt it and analyze the encrypted traffic for threats. So if you didn't know that one, you're definitely not ready to take the CySA Plus, right? So, or we have to issue SSL certificates to encrypt all traffic. SSL inspection, while SSL is sometimes used to encrypt traffic, now being replaced by like TLS, stuff like that, the newer protocols. But while SSL is used to encrypt, that's not the right answer, because it's talking about inspection, which is inspecting the packets, which means you'd have to decrypt the packets and analyze the encrypted traffic. So let's go to the next question. What does PAM manage? Password complexity, physical access controls, privileged accounts with elevated permissions, public access networks. And what does PAM stand for? It's privileged access management. And I could already know what one's right, because privileged accounts and elevated permissions. Because privileged access management, you're managing who has access to what. Whether it's role-based access control or those different access control models, right? So that's basically what PAM is. It's what manages those access control models, right? And those moreover, they manage the privileges, right? Privileged access management. Next question. What is the containerization and infrastructure? Backing up data to tape, shipping physical servers, creating network VLANs, or packaging applications with their dependencies in isolated environments. So for this one, it's going to be packaging applications with their dependencies in isolated environments. So you have to think what a container is. If you've ever used Docker, right, you're going to be done with those containers. And what Docker does is it allows you to run those applications in these containers. So it's not running like, you know, for Docker, It's running in an isolated environment. It's not running directly in the machine, right? It's not like a virtual machine, right? It's containerized apps. For a virtual machine, you're building a whole nother operating system. For containerization, you're not building a whole nother operating system. So I hope I got that concept right. But let's go to the next question. What does Cloud Access Security Broker provide? Does it provide a content delivery network, security policy enforcement between users and cloud services, certificate authority services, or backup cloud storage? And the one I'm going to have to say for this is security policy enforcement and clouds between users and cloud services. Because if you think about it with the responsibility matrix, this has nothing to do with the responsibility matrix, but it has more of it to do with the security. And how that security works between the users and the cloud services. And is everything secure between those two different aspects? That's what CASB verifies, right? It verifies, do you have a policy enforcement in place? So that's for that. Let's go to the next question. What is rogue device detection? Is it locating outdated software? Is it detecting broken hardware? Is it finding stolen laptops? Or is it identifying unauthorized devices on the network? For me, it's going to be identifying unauthorized devices on the network. Because there's another term called shadow IT, and a lot of the times, shadow IT, a lot of the questions you see with that, they're saying, oh, someone put their Xbox 360 and connected it up to the network, right? And they're not supposed to be really playing on Xbox Live on the corporate network, because there might have been some vulnerabilities on the Xbox 360 that allowed you to hack into like the network and get access to certain things you're not supposed to be getting access to. So, I mean, that's what shadow IT is. It's basically anything that hasn't been approved or where you have an asset inventory on it that shows, oh, we have this device, but then you have another device that you have no idea where it came from. So that would be pretty bad, wouldn't it? So that's why we have to identify unauthorized devices on the network. And that's how it relates to rogue device detection. It doesn't relate to it, it is rogue device detection. What does software-defined networking separate in the network architecture? Wired and wireless networks, control plane and data plane, public and private networks, or physical and logical networks. So for this, I'm going to say physical and logical networks. Yeah, I did not know that one. But it's basically control plane and data plane. A lot of the times I see control plane and data plane with zero trust. But we got that one wrong. What is the federation in identity management? Encrypting passwords, creating user groups, trusting identities across different organizations or domains, or combining multiple servers. For what federation is, it's basically you see sites that say sign in with Google, right? That would be federation. Sign in with your different accounts so that you don't have to make a new account for every different service, right? So it's trusting identities across different organizations or domains. What should trigger investigation and application logs? Introduction of new accounts or unexpected output, normal application updates, routine user login, or schedule maintenance windows. What should trigger an investigation and application logs? So new accounts, definitely, because if I saw a new account, they could be adding like different permissions and stuff to those accounts if they privilege escalated up to where they could do that. So that would be the reason that one's right. What is a single pane of glass in security operations? A transparent firewall, a physical security camera, unified dashboard integrating multiple security tools, or a single factor of authentication system. So for me, it's going to be unified dashboard integrating multiple security tools. What is the main benefit of credentialed scanning? Lower network bandwidth usage, detection of more vulnerabilities, reduced false positive rates, or faster scan completion times. What is the main benefit of credentialed scanning? For this one, I mean, faster scan completion times. No, it's detection of more vulnerabilities. So with credential scanning, you're actually applying like stuff to it, right? Detection of more vulnerabilities. So you're actually looking for a specific credentialed scanning thing, right? And if you look that up, this means actually being logged in while you're scanning. Say it's like a website that you have to log in. Being logged in will be better to scan whenever you're logged in than if you weren't logged in, because if you weren't logged in, it's not going to be able to get all the information, right? So it can detect more vulnerabilities if you are credentialed in, which means you're just logged into whatever it is, right? What does passive scanning monitor? Application source code reviews, user login attempts only, network traffic without sending packets, or host configurations actively. For me, it's going to be network traffic without sending packets, because with passive scans, right? With passive scans, you're passively scanning just to see what comes in, right? But you're not actively sending packets. You're waiting for the packets to come to you, basically. And that's what I think. I think it is basically just waiting for the packets to come to you. What is device fingerprinting used for? Blocking unauthorized users, biometric authentication systems, identifying device types in operating system, encrypting network communications, and it's actually to identify device types in operating system. So let's lock in that answer real quick. And when you're fingerprinting, you're basically trying to figure out information about the user's device, and that could lead you to finding other vulnerabilities that you could exploit on those certain devices, because certain devices could have vulnerabilities that other ones don't, or certain operating systems can have certain vulnerabilities that other ones don't. What is fuzzing and vulnerability testing? Disabling security controls, obscuring malware signatures, encrypting test data, sending malformed inputs to applications. Fuzzing is actually not disabling, it would actually be, for this one, sending malformed inputs to applications, right? So a lot of times on these websites, they'll fuzz the websites, right, to detect cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and other certain web vulnerability. So let's go to the next question. What does SCADA control? Email filtering systems, industrial process and infrastructure, mobile device management, cloud computing resources. For me, it's going to be industrial processes and infrastructure, because a lot of the times I see SCADA and ICS together. And what's ICS? Industrial Control System. and we have SCADA. And those are both for industrial systems. Like that systems that use programmable logic controllers, stuff like that. So I just always think like industrial stuff when I think SCADA or ICS. What is the purpose of security based on scanning? Testing firewall rules, monitor user behavior, measuring network speed, or verifying compliance with standards. So, what is the purpose of security based on scanning? That would be verifying compliance with standards, right? Because most of the time I think of baseline, I think where you're trying to, like, you know, where you're trying to be, right? You want that baseline to be there constantly. You don't want any deviations, right? Think of like a line chart or the like dips. You're not wanting to go down below the certain line. You're not wanting to dip below that certain line. You're always wanting to be above that certain line. So that's what I think when I think baseline, because it's a line that you can't go below. So like a line chart, I guess. But they're basically talking about compliance with the standards. Think about like NIST 853, certain ones like that. But yeah, that's basically what they're trying to ask for this question. Which framework focuses on web application security? And I know this because I've seen a lot of people say this, but this is going to be OWASP. Because I see OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities all the time where it's like, oh, here's this certain web vulnerability. Here's this certain web vulnerability. PCI DSS is financial. ISO is other types of industries. CIS is just so you have like a benchmark, right? And ISO is more like technical, basically, for certain industries, right? But let's go to the next question. What does Nmap primarily perform? We know this one, but let's read out the question. Incident response automation, malware analysis, network scanning and mapping, log aggregation. So the right one for this would be network scanning and mapping. So what does Nmap primarily perform? Network scanning and mapping. So they're trying to scan the network, see what ports are open, see what the different scans bring up. So that's what Nmap does. What is Burp Suite used for? Web application security testing, email security gateway, antivirus scanning, network packet analysis. I'm just going to say web application security testing. Because I see Burp Suite and I see two of them. Really, really frequently I see two of them. I see Z attack proxy, right? Or they call it ZAP a lot of times. OWASP ZAP. They call it Z attack proxy. And I see that one and Burp Suite both being used for web application security testing. So those are the two like web things that I see the most frequently, right? What does a debugger help analyze? Firewall configurations, user access logs, program execution in memory, network traffic patterns. For me, it's going to be... I'll let you choose your answer, but for me, it is going to be... program execution and memory. Because a lot of the times I think you're like debugging code. a lot of times you'll see the debug information so that you know how to fix the code. And a lot of times they're talking about memory program execution. So whenever you execute a program, you'll usually see a debug log, stuff that's wrong, like errors in your program, stuff like that. All this other stuff's just red herrings. What does Scout Suite assess? Mobile application security, cloud infrastructure configurations, endpoint antivirus status, or physical security controls. And I'm going to give you to the rest of this time to answer it. But I already know what the answer is. So the answer is going to be cloud infrastructure configuration. Because a lot of times I see them using it for AWS. And those certain like Azure, I guess. And they have Google Cloud Platform. But I see them mainly using it for AWS. And cloud infrastructure configurations, that's what I see them using it for. Because a lot of the times with the responsibility matrix, they're like, sometimes they're like, you know, you have to manage the security a little bit. We'll manage this whole security with our servers, but you have to manage the security of what you run on the systems. So that's what I can see. You're having to use Scout Suite to manage the stuff yourself, right? Now for the next one, what does CVSS measure? And I would say firewall effectiveness, vulnerability severity scores, network bandwidth usage, malware detection rates. And I'm going to just let you think about it for the rest of the time, right? But for me, it's going to be vulnerability severity scores. Because CVSS stands for Common Vulnerability Scoring System. So they're trying to do the vulnerability scoring stuff. So, I mean, that's why I picked that one. What indicates a higher severity in CVSS? I'd almost always say, I'm not going to give you the answer, but I can tell what ones are wrong and right. Because local attack, that's, I don't know about that one. But either that or I'd say probably this one. Because you're thinking low attack. If I can, if even the person that's a script kiddie can go in there and mess something up, right? Or there's a vulnerability that anybody could just execute easily, you're going to say that one's going to have a higher score, I would think. So that's the reason why low attack complexity is the right answer. What is a false positive in vulnerability scanning? Correctly identifying a threat, scanning the wrong network, missing a real vulnerability, or reporting a vulnerability that doesn't exist. False positive, what is that? So I already know what one's right, because a lot of times I see false positive, false negative, but this one's going to be right. For the fact that false positive, it's actually a positive. It's actually something bad. It's like malware that's on your system. Because they were saying, oh, that's not really a threat. But it actually was a threat, so that was a false positive. So, I mean, no, I was wrong about that, but a false positive is basically, oh, here's a big threat, here's a big bad threat, but it's actually not even a threat. It's someone that's not even gonna, like, you know, something that's not gonna really do anything or harm your security, like, you know, it's not gonna really do anything. What makes this zero-day vulnerability critical? It requires physical access. It's been known for years. No patches yet available. It only affects old systems. So I already know what the answer is. And I mean, a lot of these I can already tell what one it is. But, you know, no patches available yet because a lot of times you don't know. A zero day means Nobody knows about it except the person that's exploiting it, right? Once they figure out, oh, I can exploit this, they have no idea I'm exploiting it. They can do it however many times they want, right? So, until they actually find that 0-day vulnerability, nobody's going to know about it. Until someone actually reports it. What is a reflected XSS? Database injection attack. Script executed from user input. Stored malicious scripts permanently. Server-side code execution. And I would say probably between 2 and 4. It's between this one and this one. Because I'd actually say scripts executed. Server-side code execution would be server-side request forgery. So, SSRF. So that's the reason it wasn't that one. And scripts executed from user input. Because inputting something in the search bar or in something else, right? And it running that JavaScript, that's called a cross-site scripting. Because mainly XSS attacks are used with JavaScript. And that's usually the only thing that they're used with. But they're really, really bad if you don't patch them, right? What can a buffer overflow cause? DNS resolution errors, password policy violations, arbitrary code execution, or data encryption failures. So I'm not going to tell you the answer, but for buffer overflow cause, I would say arbitrary code execution, because once that overflows, it's going to execute whatever was there. So it's going to execute that code that is next in line because it's not checking for those buffer overflows, right? What is directory traversal? Enumerating user accounts, accessing files outside web root, mapping network topology, or scanning open ports. For me, it's going to be, you know, I'm not going to tell you yet until you figure out what it is, but for me, it's going to be accessing files outside web root. Let's go to the next one. What does cross-site request forgery exploit? I would say authenticated user sessions. Because a lot of the times, you know, they're trying to exploit while you're actively in the session. So that's like online banking. Once you're logged into your account, they're going to be trying to mess with that session so that they can send money to their account through an exploit, right? That's just an example. It's not. It is real. I mean, it could happen, but what is privilege escalation? Resetting user passwords, creating new user accounts, gaining higher access levels, granting temporary access. So, privilege escalation is basically gaining. I just gave away the answer, but it's gaining higher access levels than what you already have. So, privilege escalation, you're trying to escalate your privileges. What type of control is a firewall? Operational and detective, managerial and responsive, detective and corrective, or preventative and technical? For me, I'm going to say I mean, does it really prevent anything? I guess it does prevent stuff because it can block IP addresses, so it's preventing that IP address from doing something. So I guess it is preventative. It's blocking that IP address and saying this IP address isn't allowed to do this. This IP address isn't allowed to do that. Or this IP address is allowed to do that. Only this IP address is allowed to do this. What should happen before patching production? Notify all users immediately. Disable security monitoring. Test in non-production environment. Deploy to all systems. I mean, for this one, you're going to say... I'm going to say notify them, right? No, you test in a non-production environment. Because, of course, you'd want to notify them at some point, but not immediately because that's escalating way too fast. You'd want to test in a non-production environment. When should maintenance windows occur? Without prior notification, that's wrong. Only on weekends. During peak business hours or during... I already know what the answer is. You guys can pick whatever answer you want to pick, right? So during low activity hours is what I would pick. Because even on the weekends, people could still be open on the weekends. So that's definitely wrong. During peak business hours, that's 100% wrong. And without prior notification, that's 100% wrong too. What does accept mean in risk management? Eliminate the risk entirely. Implement all security controls or transfer risk to others. Or acknowledge and tolerate the risk. I'm going to say, for this one, acknowledge it. What is the attack surface reduction? Adding more security controls? Increasing firewall rules? Or minimizing exploitable entry points or encrypting all data? For me, it's going to be... minimizing exploitable entry points. What is a bug bounty program? Compliance audit process, automated scanning service, rewarding external vulnerability reports, internal penetration testing. For me, it's going to be rewarding external vulnerability reports. What does input validation prevent? Weak password creation, network congestion issues, injection and malformed data attacks, or unauthorized physical access. So for me, I'm going to say injection and malformed data attacks. What are parameterized queries used for? User authentication, encrypting databases, preventing SQL injection, or network optimization. So I'm going to say preventing SQL injection, because a lot of times if you don't do it, it's a more secure coding practice to use parameterized, right? So it can prevent it, right? If you use parameterized. Where parameterized in the sense that they're trying to detect the input, only certain input is allowed to be actually used. Other input is not allowed to be used unless it meets a certain set of standards, right? Input validation. What is threat modeling in SDLC? Managing project timelines, testing application performance, documenting user requirements, identifying potential threats early. I mean, for this one, SDLC, I mean, is it identifying potential? Yeah, it is. Identifying potential threats early. Because you're trying to identify the threats, you're trying to model out what the threat might be. So we're identifying them early so that we can have better software, right? What is the purpose of an incident response plan? Manage user permissions, guide security incident handling, document network topology, track software licenses. So I'm going to give you a couple seconds. So the answer, I believe here, would be guide security incident handling. So an incident response plan is more, what are you doing in the event of an incident? Like a breach or something like that. It doesn't have to be a breach, it could really be anything that an adversary is doing, right? So let's go to the next question. What are playbooks in incident response? User access policies, training documentation, step-by-step response procedures, backup recovery plans. Playbooks, what I like to think of them as, I like to think like what you do, and it's like step-by-step what you do. Step-by-step what you do in the event of an incident. That's what I like to think of a playbook in terms of incident response. What is a tabletop exercise? User awareness training, simulated incident discussion, physical security drill, or network configuration test. For me, it's going to be simulated incident discussion because we're not actually doing a drill, right? This is just a simulated, it's not even a real, like, it's not even a real thing that's happening. It's just everything simulated to get us ready for when that incident actually does happen, right? Why is business continuity and disaster recovery planning important? Does it simplify user authentication, ensure operational continuity, improve network speed, or reduce software licensing costs? For me, it's going to be ensures operational continuity because business continuity is BC, right? And disaster recovery. We're always wanting to ensure operational continuity, and that means basically making sure everything's in place, all the planning is in place, right? So when the thing actually does happen, the business doesn't get hurt by it. So that's basically what that is. What does forensic analysis preserve? Does it preserve user productivity data, system performance metrics, evidence for the investigation, network bandwidth logs? For me, it's going to be evidence for the investigation, I would think. Because forensics is all about preserving the evidence because you want that exact copy of, for example, if it was like a hard drive that they were trying to preserve the evidence on, which most of the times it is, they'd have to follow strict like protocols to ensure that the evidence is preserved and stuff like that. So that's why I picked evidence for investigation. What is root cause analysis? Is it scanning for vulnerabilities, monitoring user activity, testing backup systems, or identifying underlying incident reasons? So for me, it's going to be identifying underlying incident reasons because a lot of the times root, it's talking about exactly, the root is exactly something, right? Saying exactly how did it actually happen. We're trying to figure out exactly how it happened. And accurately, right? Identifying underlying incident reasons. So next question. What are lessons learned sessions, budget planning sessions, compliance audit meetings, post-incident improvement reviews, or user training programs? Lessons learned, I would say post-incident improvement. I don't think it would be that one, because it's kind of iffy on post-incident and user training, because both of those could involve lessons learned sessions. But user training programs isn't the exact answer that they want, because if, you know, they're not going to ask you about what did you learn, because you're not going to be making mistakes. And the user training programs, they're just training you, right? But in the post-incident, that's actually after the incident happened. You're actually going to be learning something because something did happen, right? When should incident response tools be prepared? Is it only during audits, during forensic analysis, after an incident occurs, before an incident happens? For me, it's going to be, you know, for me, it's going to be before the incident happens, because you want to be ready for when that incident actually happens, right? Because if you waited until after it happened, you're not really going to prevent anything, right? What should training include for IR teams? IR stands for incident response. Is it financial reporting, response procedure and tools, marketing strategies, software development only? Well, for me, all these other ones doesn't really apply. This is the most important thing: response procedures and tools. Because if you think about it, why is an incident response team going to do financial reporting, marketing strategies, or software development? They're not doing that stuff. They're actually responding to incidents. Like it says, incident response. What is chain of custody? Is it user permission tracking, network access logs, evidence handling, documentation, incident timeline records? For me, chain of custody is how you handle the evidence. And that's a key part in forensic analysis, right? If they don't have a valid chain of custody, someone could have went in and messed with the evidence. But if they have a valid chain of custody, there's gonna be no break in the chain that someone could go in there, possibly go in there and mess with or alter that evidence, right? What phase comes after containment? Is it lessons learned, detection, eradication, or preparation? After you contain, that'll be way before preparation, right? It'd be way before detection and lessons learned. So I think I just gave away Containment, eradication. Because lessons learned always comes last, right? You're learning a lesson lastly. But it's preparation first, then it's detection, then it's containment, then it's eradication, then it's lessons learned. So I hope that helped you realize like the sequence of steps. So what is the first step in incident response? Post-incident review, detection and analysis, recovery, or containment? For me, this one seems like it would be something to do with incident. So, I mean, the first step would be detection, right? Because, like I said, detection comes first. If you don't detect anything, how are you going to know that it's there, right? So, this always comes first. And the incident response steps, right? Incident response planning, this always comes first. You have to detect it before you can do anything. What does isolation achieve during incidents? Update security patches? Does it prevent threat spread? Backs up data? Increases system performance? For me, isolation achieved during incidents, that would be what does isolation update security patches? Prevents threat spread. That one ran out because I wasn't reading the questions really, but prevents threat spread. Isolation, because if you don't isolate it from the network, then the threat could be able to spread. If it's a network-based vulnerability or exploit, could spread. So it's always best to isolate the network, right? When should stakeholders be notified? Only if legally required, according to a communication plan. Never during incidents or only after full resolution. And I would have said because all these other ones are just saying only and like being very limiting. But for the one I'm seeing that's not being that limiting, it's going to be according to the communication plan. Because these ones are saying never, only. Those are more limiting. And this one is more open to like doing stuff according to the communication plan. Which, it's called reporting and like communication and reporting. On the CySA Plus domain, you'll actually see a domain called reporting and communication. What is the incident severity classification based on? Calculating financial loss, measuring network speed, counting affected users, or prioritizing response efforts? I'd say for me it would be incident severity classification. That would be prioritizing response efforts, wouldn't it? Because incident severity, you want to do by the most severity. So something that's really going to be like low complexity, right? Something that anybody could go exploit. You're going to want to go, that's like a critical vulnerability. You want to go prioritize that first, right? What should be documented during incidents? Financial impacts alone, user complaints only, all actions and observations, only final resolution steps. What should be documented during incidents? So that would be all actions and observations, I would say. Because you want your documentation to be complete. You don't want to just document the bare minimum. Good analyst will document everything, right? So I'd say all actions and observations. Because the next person that looks at the documentation, they're not going to really know what you're talking about. So you want good documentation that people can read and understand, right? What is containment strategy selection based on? Is it based on time of day, team size available, incident type and impact, or available budget only? I'd say it has nothing to do with the team, the time of day, or the available budget, because it's more over why are you trying to like contain it? Is it like, what's the impact of it? Is it really going to hurt you, or is it just minimal impact, right? Stuff like that you gotta be thinking. What validates successful eradication? Is it budget, reconciliation, network speed test, user feedback surveys, or system scanning and monitoring? For me, it's going to be... I can already tell because all the other ones are red herrings, but you can scan the system and you can monitor it. But there could still be a backdoor, right? There could still be like a rootkit. They have no ideas there. What is the recovery phase goal? Update documentation, train new staff, identify root cause, or restore normal operations. For me, it's going to be to restore the normal operations because recovery is like you want to recover. You don't want to be down and out because someone did something to your system, right? So that's what I think whenever I think restore normal operations. Or recovery, my bad. Because recovery is just one of the phases, right? So you want to restore to normal operations. What improves from lessons learned reviews? I'd say feature because I didn't even read the questions, but network bandwidth capacity, software development speed, feature incident response, or user satisfaction scores. I mean, user satisfaction scores could be going up, but the real answer would be this one. Because potentially if you get better processes, better lessons learned, actually you know what to not do, potentially you could get a better satisfaction score, but for this we're just going to be getting feature incident response. So you can be better at responding to the incidents. What should vulnerability reports include? Network diagrams only, user passwords or affected hosts and risk scores, or only vulnerability names? What should vulnerability reports include? Network diagrams, user passwords, affected host, and risk scores. I'd say affected host because you want to know what the actual vulnerabilities are. That's for the risk scores. You want to know the affected host, who was actually infected. That's what you'd want to document. You want to put one specific thing. You want to put the affected host and the risk scores. I mean, that's the most important thing, right? And it's not limiting like these ones. These ones are saying only or user passwords or network diagrams. Of course, you'd want to put some of the network diagrams, some of the time.